All right. The thing says we're live, so we're live. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and whatever you might identify as, the memes of destruction here, and I am joined today by the. Oh my god, and I don't know how to pause my own stream because I'm still a noob. I'm joined by the lone wolf Cub. Say hi, Cub.
Hi.
All right, as well as Ahakaran. Say hi, Ahakaran.
Hello, it's Araki.
Anakin. Okay, I will learn someday maybe, but essentially, the topic we have currently is the internet real life? Because with the recent advances of technology, specifically in the area of telecom, it's becoming very murky. Because I still remember back in the day, I got my paycheck, I go over down to the bank, I fill out the stuff at the bank, you do all that stuff there. Now you have the ability to go, oh look, I took a little photo, it goes in there. So we're seeing the digitization of many things within our society, and it seems that things are starting to bleed over. Like if you say something online, people start going after you in real life, and the internet. If you do something in real life, people go after you on the internet. So what says you folks? I know, Karen, you did have a counter argument, so I'd like you to voice your opinion now.
I believe the internet has more in common with the astral world as the occultists portrayed that in the Middle Ages through the Renaissance.
Could you go on a little bit further with that point?
Okay, let's take the concept of real name. If I have your real name, I can do a lot of damage with that to you. I can also do a lot of good with that to you online. But I will, in both cases, have power over you.
Well, there is definitely power within a name. I know that when I did go to one of Professor Peterson's events, I just went to talk to him, and he straight up asked me, he's like, oh, what's your name? And I shared my name with him, and I did find that a little touching, a little personal, and that's why one reason I told him he was a pretty good wizard. So, and by wizard, I'll define that there. What do I consider a wizard? A wizard is a person who changes the world around them via verbal and semantic components, i.e., their words and actions. While that may also more or less be the definition from Dungeons and Dragons upon what a wizard is for casting their spells, they must be able to speak as well as not have their hands bound to weave their signs and everything. I think it's a kind of cool, nerdy definition there. So kind of what I took away from there is that basically it's almost an idea, a concept in one's head, or am I just completely missing the mark?
Well, a concept in part, yes, but you know how common it is to use avatars. I got my avatar, you got your avatar as the means of destruction.
I have no idea what you're talking about this custom avatar that Brittany made for me. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yes. Because the idea of the avatar is that it works as a way to shield you, so people know who you are without connecting your online self with the real world. And that gives you a certain amount of security when you do stuff, because real names online has a lot of power, and it's why we all use avatars and stuff like that, because information is forever, so you don't want people to have unnecessary information about you.
Well, no, that is a big thing. Now, other individuals like myself, if I choose to turn on my camera, I have the right to that. If somebody really wants to find out who I am, I don't think it's the most difficult thing in the world. But then again, that is my personal choice. I'm not going back there talking about difficult things, trying to eternally shield myself in the fear that something's going to happen. Because, I mean, I happen to live in the United States of America, and I mean, for all of the potential shortcomings and sins of the past that the nation has had, I mean, realistically, we're pretty secure compared to a lot of other places within the world in and of itself.
No, you aren't.
Well, I mean, that's not necessarily an unfair. If somebody really wants to do me harm, they can do me harm. I mean, hey, it is what it is. I mean, a giant 7-foot-tall flaming gummy bear could crash from my roof and crush me right now. I mean, it's possible, it may not be probable. So that's
Uh,
the
uh,
thing when
uh,
you live in there.
Memes, you mean more harm than you do to yourself by showing your picture all the time?
Well, I mean, you could just say that that's strictly narcissism or whatnot. That wouldn't be an unfair characterization of it. No, but a lot of it is a lot of folks do that to shield themselves. However, one of the things that you see is, especially, I've even heard like Dave Rubin say this, like if he's going to talk to folks on Twitter, if somebody is doing something, sometimes he won't even respond unless they actually have a picture of a human being rather than just having the stereotypical the anime avatar or whatnot. Because I mean, hey, I love anime. A lot of folks do. But one of the things that you do is providing a barrier there. So if you don't specifically see something, people's minds often go to the worst possible place and they think this individual has something that they're trying to hide at times. And I did also hear this from a gentleman who I believe was one of the founders of Comicsgate, Edwin Boyett, the other day. Is I guess they're having a bit of a shindig, a little. Well, I think the quartering said it was a civil war within Comicsgate, and that a lot of folks are kind of going after each other. He's like, dude, this is about comic books, man. It's like, really? You need to put people up for talking about comic books or saying something you disagree with? And his big thing is what he was mentioning is if you have an avatar, they're kind of looking at you as an avatar, and it almost takes away from a certain level of humanity because as human beings, we've developed over thousands of years to generally interact with one another, see the nuance of a person's face in real life. Over the past 100 years, we've developed the ability to kind of differentiate things and be able to speak to somebody on the phone, basically an audio basis. And now with the internet, basically, if you just kind of put up the avatar and something, it's like, oh, that's just some dude that identifies as a scaly on the internet. So it's like, obviously, since I don't see the human face, he's less of a human being. And that may not be what people are trying to do, but this is effectively what I see being done. And one of the reasons why I think a lot of folks don't actually show their face necessarily is because that opens them up to direct criticism about things that maybe are very important to them, or maybe they don't necessarily have the strongest level of perhaps self-esteem with the way they look, they present themselves or something. Because let's face it, we're human beings. We're we're complicated creatures. We're perfectly imperfect. So I realize I've bloviated for a while, and I would like to get Cub's take on this. So Cub, you have the floor, sir.
I think human beings in general learn from childhood on that they have to pretend something. They don't learn these things, these idealized things like honesty or be yourself and so on is bullshit. Reality is a complete different thing. Reality means, in fact, pretending, mimicking, being someone else, trying to be more, trying to appear as more as somebody really is, or trying to pretend that you are smart even if you are stupid. For example, using fancy titles with philosophy or life and so on for your videos, and it's all pretending. And this avatar thing is just a consequence of that. Because, of course, most people aren't satisfied with the way they look or speak or whatever. And it's funny because you use the title Real Life, and Real Life was one of the first games on the internet where you could pretend to be somebody else with an avatar. And it was really, when it came up back then, this game, I never played it, but I know about it. It was a little phenomena because people liked it so much to be in this real life game more than the real life. So for me, it's just the consequence of our human nature that we are now using the internet further to pretend being something we aren't, trying to be more as the sum of our pieces and something like that.
We want to be part of something greater than ourselves.
Yes and no. Kind of. We spoke about that before the stream. People want to be part of something bigger, but also so they want to fit in. but also they want to be kind of unique and something special. But this doesn't go hand in hand with each other most of the times, because when they have to decide, I want to be something special or something unique, or I just want to fit in, they normally in 99% decide to fit in, because the thing they fear the most is being alone, as kind of solitary, due to the fact that they are something special or different, or something like that.
That's very interesting, because that actually takes me back to some of my old World of Warcraft days. And I remember when we were doing Upper Blackrock Spire at one point, we were in the rookery and everything, and we took out the boss there, and the devout gloves, the gloves for the priest class, dropped. I happened to be a mage that actually happened to miss out on the earlier higher quality gloves, so I had basically just a piece of trash gloves, and I kind of asked him, like, does anyone mind if I take it? And apparently I didn't know there was a priest in that group that needed it. I happened to roll on it. I won them. And apparently I was branded a ninja, and I was blacklisted from that particular group that I was with. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm branded a ninja. Should I quit? Long story, down the line, I ended up joining the guild. Apparently they forgot who the hell I was, but I guess enough time had passed that my transgressions were forgiven or forgotten at that point. But no, it's people don't want to be excommunicated from the group, because, I mean, we're social creatures. Occasionally there are folks that maybe just kind of live off in the land by themselves, but very often you might just see smaller groups of folks. But even in those smaller groups of folks, they're still often relying on one another for defense, for gathering food, water, wherever it is. And now in a lot of more modern Western societies, I mean, you really, with our technology now, you don't really need to interact with people. It's like I could literally just have groceries delivered, be out there, pay digitally, go out there when I'm ready, not even look at the person, pick them up, bring them inside, drive to work in my little steel horse as well, flip people off if I want because I'm protected by my steel horse here, and then just go to work and just put on the standard mask for work and just go do your thing there. It's like, okay, you can do that, but is it good?
Yeah, the smaller groups are just mimicking, or want to be like the bigger groups. Because the fact is, people think they can escape from hierarchy. I don't know if it's called in English that when you have a caste system, you have a leader and followers. Is it called hierarchy or something like that?
Yeah, the
it's a
hierarchy. Well, exactly. It's like, so like as form of the government, technically you have like the president and stuff, like standard organizational structure. Yes, you're using the correct word. Yes.
Yes. And the thing is, there are people who are alphas, kind of, who are alphas, kind of leader, and so on, and people who are betas, who are followed normally. And these structures you can find in a big form, like with a land or country or government, whatever, but also in the smaller groups. Even when you have three people who meet together saying, "Oh no, we don't want to have to do anything with this awful mainstream or normal things or whatever," and we build our own group. But in this group, there will always be one who leads them, even if they don't think that this is the case, because that's also human nature. Even if many people try to pretend it isn't that way, and that's now we are back to this pretending with avatars and internet and trying everywhere, trying to shine bigger and brighter than reality.
No, that's one of the things that I've heard from some more folks that are probably a bit further left than many folks out there. Is their big thing is they want to completely destroy all the hierarchy in a way, and I'm like, if you can show me a way that we can do it, I'm all ears. It's just I don't know how we can do it with our current level of technology and society right now. And I often would just kind of counter. It's like, well, what if we could take the pyramid that often can seem very steep And if we can just flatten it out, I'm like, is that enough? And they say, well, that would be a start, but ultimately, and I understand the concept because they want things to be fair, but at the same time, you don't want to necessarily destroy any incentive structure for folks to go out there and do great things. Great things may benefit all of society and the entire world down the line. At the same time, those great things may be great, horrific things. I'm just thinking about like the whole intro into nuclear engineering and stuff, because now we have nuclear power, which in general, aside from the waste, which we're working on dealing with, it can provide power in a very green way on demand to the rest of the world. But at the same time, it also led to the development of the hydrogen bomb.
No, it can't
Actually,
provide any interesting kind of power in a green way. Nuclear power is the worst thing ever. There is no way where you can get rid of the waste, and I can tell you where they get rid of the waste. They use it as weapons.
Well,
They use
that
it
is
for the weapons, and these are the worst kind of weapons, mostly used in third world countries or Arabic countries and something like that. And these bring real horror to the people, but most people don't know about that. They have this idealized thinking of, oh yeah, we have kind of green nuclear power or whatever bullshit they get told from the media and believe that. And yeah, it's just depressing. But let's hear what Akim has to say on that matter.
well, actually, I wanted to raise a point when it comes to hierarchies because there is a good example about why hierarchy is always going to be exist for human nature. The only way to get rid of that is if you want to build a house.
Yeah, getting rid of the hierarchy is kind of against human nature, because
It is.
when you have a family, and now we are talking about this SJW movement and so on. When you have a family structure, you have a father, a mother, a child, smallest family structure, and this is from nature kind of normally everybody has its place in this mini hierarchy for a reason, because even if the father is a kind of like the boss or whatever, he also has the most what do you call it, responsibility. He tries to, he goes to work and so on, and protects the family and so on. So he has also the biggest responsibility, and that's the reason why normally he makes the decisions. I say now in an old-fashioned way. I don't want to sound like somebody from the last century or something like that, but in an old-fashioned way, this is how it goes.
well, yes, but that does also feed into a lot of more leftish arguments about saying how society is set up as a patriarchy. I personally, is it a patriarchy? Sure. But the thing is, with a patriarchy, can it be absolutely tyrannical? Yes, it can. Can it also be very benevolent? Yes, it can. And that's something that I actually I'm stealing away from Professor Peterson, because he has stated that in the very Jungian terms. Because basically, yeah, things aren't just, well, this is just strictly good. Could it be? I guess, but it all depends on the individual, the perspective, the effect that it's had. What may be good for some folks may be horrific to others. There may be some that benefit from something and others that just have it as a detriment as well. So these are things that maybe historically we didn't necessarily know. And very often, if we knew them, it's very easy to pass off, because if you don't actually physically see it in front of you, it's very easy to ignore it, because I mean, our minds are great at doing mental gymnastics to justify the things that we do in life. Is that necessarily a good thing? I mean, that sounds more of a thing to kind of just keep our minds at peace, because if one tries to absorb all the information out there, I mean, that's impossible. We're human beings. We're not God. So it's really one of those things where I'm unsure of the best way to go forward. I have ideas, but it's just I see so much of what's happening here digitally bleeding over, and this is starting to raise an analogy for me in that the internet itself is becoming a form of a digital frontier. I'm sure it always was, but if it's bleeding over more and more, that leads me to the question of if we start seeing folks that maybe identify as like my internet personality, the memes of destruction, whatnot. If I were to be banned from a site and I felt that was unjust because of me simply using my speech the way I personally see fit, is that form of digital execution? Because you're kind of erasing somebody's digital identity. And I hear a lot of things promoting that identity is important. So I realize I didn't really form a question. I'm just curious, both you gentlemen's thoughts on this.
Can I start?
Go for it.
Well, of course, identities is important. That is why people want be using a lot of identities, but rather cultivate a one or two. Of course, they may have throwaway identities, but it's the one or two identities that they always choose to cultivate because they need a presence, and the presence means history, a body of work, so to speak. So even if it's an avatar like me, Arakin, you would still be able to search me and find my body of work if there was any. And
You want to go, Cup?
Yeah, I thought there is a follow-up.
Oh, I don't know. Would you like me to ask you a question? I realize I just kind of like vomited some words out there.
No, I would like you to answer or respond to the things Akim said.
Oh, could you restate that very quickly? I was kind of trolling Sharadi in the chat. My apologies.
okay, the point I was trying to make is that identities is important. It's a reason why most people only cultivate one or two identities. Tie most of their body of work online to these identities. Because, yes, it's avatar, but it is an identity too. An identity is tied to what that identity has achieved, so to speak.
Okay. Is that just because it's easier? Because that's the way I kind of see it. Because a lot of times we'll hear things about like race and gender and stuff like that, and those are identities that are often very important to people. However, and again, citing Professor Peterson there, he says if you extend that out to about 6, or even if it's not 6, about 10 different identities, you go back down to the individual, and that's something that I'm like, yes, I believe in that. I'm like, okay, so why is it that I hear you say that, and then you go back to very much the standard, all these Marxists want to destroy everything. It's like, okay, because at least when you're giving that reference point about those different identities of the individual, you're actually playing the same game. This is my big thing. I feel like so many of us were playing different games.
no.
We're coming at it and we're not touching. Go on.
No. You misunderstand. This has nothing to do with culture Marxism. This has to do with cyberpunk culture. Way older ideas. Look.
Oh, sorry.
I am Anakin Greenmoon. That is my online persona, my avatar. It has nothing to. It's not anything about race. It has nothing to do with gender. It has to do with this is who I portray myself as online. I'm an individual. I am my real name self, and I am also Anakin Greenmoon. That is what I mean with identity. That is what I mean with avatar. Not this race and gender BS that the culture Marxists come by, because that has nothing to do with the online space, the cyberspace.
What? Go on.
Arakin, I would like to ask you something. Did you know the author Oscar Wilde? Books of the author.
I know of the author, but I don't believe I read much about him. I did read Neuromancer and Snow Crash.
Yeah, the most popular book from him was back then The Picture of Dorian Gray.
Ah, that one.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
one. It's a very famous story, and most people know the story but never read the book. But that's not important. It's I had to think about constantly during our conversation. I had to think about this novel because it plays in the 19th century, and even back then, it's a kind of what Dorian Gray did back then with preventing his how people see him as this handsome guy who is not nice to look at and so on, but in fact just his the picture of him gets older and uglier with every sin he prevents or make. So he uses a kind of avatar the whole time for real life, but his real self you just could see in the picture. When you see the picture, it's getting older and older and uglier and like a monster. And I constantly had to think about that because it's a kind of early form of using avatar reversed 200 years ago.
Well, that's very interesting because I mean, for years, and I mean, even still, a lot of authors will use pen names. And one of the reasons they did that, it's like, well, if I published under my actual name, well, maybe they won't like it because they look at my name like, oh, I'm not a fan of those people because that's associated with these folks. And I mean, like, no, that's just a thing, man. Like that's just history, man. And so you hear all these things, and like that does seem to be something that has been within humanity for a number of years now, basically becoming something that we may not necessarily be. I would almost counter that in a way, the utilization of an avatar or an alias may actually be a way for people to express parts of themselves that maybe they don't normally bring up within their common everyday lives as well. Kind of like accentuating a part of themselves, almost a form of kind of kayfabe, if you will. If you're familiar with the greater professional wrestling community, it's the whole genre. It's just the whole this is who you are and this is how you are acting within the business itself. So
Yes, but that is actually why I opened up with pointing out that digital space has more in common with the astral world as described by occultists back in the Renaissance. Because a lot of the same rules apply for the digital space as it portrayed within the occult. And yes, that also would prove correct with the Dorian Gray story, in that the avatar acts as a shield, yes, but if you abuse your avatar, then that basically means that you wreck everything tied to the avatar, and you may have to start all over again as a new person. But then that will again be a newborn, no body of work, no history.
that's
It-
very interesting. Oh, go on.
yes, and the interesting thing is when you read this novel from Oscar Wilde, you get what the biggest fear is of Dorian Gray. His biggest fear is, in fact, that people see who he really is or what he really is. So he hides constantly the picture of himself, and it's a similarity to what we have nowadays with people who start out with fake names like Lone Wolf Gap, avatars like Stupid Sheep or whatever, or something else, and try to pretend to be something, anything, but not really themselves. And even maybe like to be in this avatar form more than in reality, because maybe in reality or in real life they don't have so many friends or social contacts maybe they don't get along with other people so good. But even if they do, and they start this life on the internet, there will come a time where it comes this way, where they see it's much easier to live a kind of controlled existence on the internet instead of the chaotic, uncontrolled, boring one in real life.
Because you can't script real life. You can script a YouTube video. And that's very interesting, the points you guys just touched upon, because in a way, if all of a sudden your avatar or your online identity kind of becomes sullied, kind of dragged through the mud, if you would, for whatever particular reason, you have the ability to either delete it or create a new one. And that's almost a form of like a digital resurrection, if you would, right?
Yeah, there is a digital resurrection, but again, it is that in all ways you can take about it, because as again, a new avatar means no history, no body of work. You have to start from scratch and build yourself up again. Any influence and power your previous avatar had is gone.
Well, you still have to go and level up and grind away to kind of achieve what you may have had, or even go in a different direction.
Exactly. And I believe that my generation understood this better. But these new generations, they don't seem to understand the sanctity of the avatar.
I mean, is this just a consequence of just growing up with just always being connected, like growing up within the social media age? Because, I mean, if you think about it, it's like I was actually born in 1984. I know. Hey, Cub, I got you there, man. And but yeah, no, I grew up in one of the generations where, yeah, we're probably one of the last generations that still remember going outside, picking up a stick and whacking away at a tree. Why? Because that tree was the boss monster that we needed to go after no matter what. That's just how we did things. So, but now you have a lot of folks. Yeah, we had video games at the time, but now if you have folks, dude, it's 2019. There are folks that are already adults now, as we have defined it, that literally grew up with social media platforms existing, with social media in many different forms, with broadband, with mobile access. So now you have the ability to always be connected. So a lot of times, there's no way to disconnect, if you would, because before, if you got bullied at school or something, you eventually were able to go home, and unless they rounded out like a posse or something to beat the crap out of you, I mean, you had an escape. Now there's literally no escape, because if you go to socialize, if all of a sudden you're being associated with these different groups, that's why I think that might be a reason, maybe not the primary reason, why many folks, they just hold to these digital avatars and everything. And I'll be straight up, I've heard different folks on the internet say that the first time that like a guy like Sargon turned on his camera, they're like, "Oh, that seems weird. I just imagine him as a giant stone statue." Because we develop these associations over time.
Hey, there is an escape, and I'm going to use it. I'm going to get another beer.
Right on, man. Right on. But yeah, just one of these things. And I know, Karen, we've discussed certain things, and I know we maybe want to keep some things on the down low, but I mean, there does seem to be a real push with these different things. Like I'll just tangentially touch upon, I think it was CNN or somebody, they go into like a digital brothel or something. So like they were putting on like these 3D things, and then basically you're adding the experience and everything. And it's just, well, we're taking things that occur in real life, and now we're putting them online and trying to immerse ourselves. I think the easiest way to boil down what I'm trying to ask is, are we just trending towards the Matrix?
Yes, and actually I believe that the internet is going to go from a flat structure as what we have now, and into a more node-like structure instead.
No.
And that is partly because of the blockchain.
No, I agree. And we've seen other instances like this. And again, you can correct me, but I've heard of the Fediverse. I know Tim Pool keeps mentioning this in some of his videos, in that like a platform like Gab that has been basically kind of deplatformed from different processors and kind of being shunned forced into kind of its own corner of the internet, that once it joined the Fediverse, that sounds like kind of a decentralized node-like structure. Is that something similar, or am I just kind of going off into side field?
No. It's entirely correct. The Fediverse is likely going to be one of these nodes that the next generation of the internet is going to be, but it won't be the only node. There will likely be at least 5, 6 different big crypto companies, for lack of better words, that will each be their own node, their own structure, so to speak.
Now, going off that, what I had kind of heard is the whole concept of the Fediverse is you'd have those different nodes, but then you have a shared avenue, if you would, along those nodes. It's kind of like having toll roads, in that if you happen to be a member, you have access to these different roads as well. Is that? I'm not familiar with it. I'm asking you. I realize maybe you're not.
Yeah, I have been into Fediverse a bit in the past. I had a friend of mine that decided to create her own node in that system. And I think the best way for me to visualize the Fediverse is that it is like its own nation, where each node is a state.
Hmm.
They're
Well,
connected together, so they have these national rules they need to follow in order to connect to each other. But then each state can decide if they want to communicate with the other states or not.
and then if
Which was
kind
a
of
big gap.
right, so if one state were to kind of put a ban or quash something, but then if the other states kind of allowed the through, it could kind of still get through on some levels, and then that leads to what may be an option. I'm not the biggest fan of it, to potentially attempt to solve issues on the internet, is that we might just see things based upon geolocation. So like if I'm over here in the United States, I'd have access, but then I might only have access to certain things over there in Germany, over there in the Netherlands, or over there in Russia or something. Like are we going to nation-based internets, kind of like China's doing, or for protection, or I don't even know, but I just see so many folks just from different cultures, backgrounds, societies, and stuff, that all of a sudden, yeah, we were living as human beings in our small knit groups over thousands of years, separated by thousands of miles, oceans, like mountains, this, that, or the other thing, that would kind of just keep us secluded. So we developed over time. Now it's kind of like it's digital immersion into so many different cultures and histories. It's kind of like, rather than sipping through a straw, it's like trying to sip through a fire hose that's connected to the ocean, just because there's so much information. And apparently, what could go wrong when you get several billion people all together with the ability to more or less instantly communicate across thousands of miles? I mean, what type of bad things could happen?
Yeah, the worst thing that is already happened is that these 7 billion people can't communicate spontaneously with each other, because they are restricted thanks to their governments and thanks to new laws and Article 12, 13, and 17, and stupid things like that, to get rid of the constitution. And yeah, that's the problem. That's the things that are happening already.
So you're more of a free market take on it, in that we should maximize people's ability to communicate, to kind of sort through these things.
Well, I don't think we're going to get a national internet. The will and the culture of the internet itself means that it won't happen. Like Gab is a perfect example. Every time you try and block someone out, you will always have one group or another to make some sort of method to get around any blockage. No, that is not what I am thinking about when I said we're going to get a node-like structure on the internet. And more thinking about, as I said, the internet at the moment is a flat structure. There is no hierarchies where you have to go through a certain checkpoint in order to get into the system. The Fediverse, for instance, is one such node, because you need to go through their system in order to get access to the Fediverse.
Well, that's actually very interesting because that kind of levels a lot of the hierarchy.
In some ways. And then you also got the darknet, which is a separate layer of internet, which I believe lies below the clearnet that we all know and use.
Something below the Google sphere.
Yes.
Oh God, the crazy thing is, in a couple of years, there might actually be textbooks kind of citing. It's like, well, the darknet, it's what exists beyond the Google sphere. I'm like, wait a second, are we just taking internet lingo now and applying it to the same things that we do for the Earth? Is that wrong? Is that right? I don't know.
Oh, it's entirely right, because the internet is not real estate. It's just that we haven't really figured out how to build on it properly. Blockchain will make that easier and more possible to build something more lasting infrastructure.
Yeah, but a blockchain is you are speaking about the system that also where the Bitcoin is based on, with the blockchain. And they say, yeah, Bitcoin is maybe the future because you can't manipulate it because of the blockchain and so on. But Bitcoin is not the future, and blockchain, blockchain or no blockchain, the thing is, when you can see where every action comes from, who does what. For example, with a Bitcoin, who has owned it, who has sold it, who did what with it. It's a kind of control mechanism. So I'm not a fan of things like that make the user transparent as hell, because privacy is the only thing we didn't talk about in this is internet real life stream till now, and privacy is the only thing that matters.
Well, privacy is also something that we have guaranteed in the U.S. Constitution, or at least the right
Yeah.
against illegal searches and seizures, which actually may be something that could be used to help prioritize privacy. I know Mark Zuckerberg has spoke on this, and it's a big push. And I mean, whatever you think of the dude, he's at least saying the words.
Memes. Every billionaire can, in seconds, he knows exactly who you are and where you live. But you don't know every billionaire here on this planet, because privacy is just a one-way road for them. It means they have their privacy and we are transparent.
So it sounds like privacy is a big thing, and if somebody could provide that level of privacy, that would be something valuable, correct?
I would say yes, but I also want to point out that Bitcoin was a proof of work when it comes to blockchain. It's all the reason it is big is because it was the first. But blockchain technology and privacy has come a long way from what Bitcoin was.
Yeah, as I said, I know this blockchain thing because I informed myself about the Bitcoin, and it's kind of the thing why people think that Bitcoin is not, you can't manipulate Bitcoin because of this blockchain technology, I think. But it's also a kind of transparency for this currency. But if you have a currency that is transparent, where what I mean is, you know exactly who did what with which Bitcoin. Means also you can't go to a shop, buy something, and nobody knows about that. It means everybody, people are able to look up every step in your life, everything you did with your money. But when we're talking about money, we don't really are talking about money. We are talking about the freedom to do things, because money is just the equivalent for your work or something like that. But if somebody controls how you spend the achievements of your work, that means he kind of controls you yourself. He controls your life.
Well, that actually goes into. I just want to touch upon this real quick, Karen. One of the things that I've noticed is that a lot of cash-based transactions, that seems to be not really the biggest thing, and this actually kind of terrifies me, because I do believe it was somebody, maybe either Alex Jones or along the InfoWars crowd, that started stating this about a year and a half ago, and I'm like, oh, well, it's Alex Jones or whatever. And then I noticed, I'm like, I was at Target the other day, because there's one fairly close to my house, so I go down there and everything, and I'm trying to pay for my goods in cash, and I'm like, I don't have the option to use cash, and I kind of like call the person that's kind of like maintaining the different self-checkout registers. She comes over, punches in a little code and everything. She gives me a $5 Target gift card, so basically just for my troubles and everything, I guess. I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. I'm just like, oh, you guys aren't fans of cash or something? So I noticed that. And even when I went to go use an ATM at an airport more recently, I talked with one of the officers. He's like, oh, no, they removed the ATM last month. I'm like, why? It's like, well, if you think about it, I mean, from a cost perspective, if you are taking cash, you need to have a form of a cash delivery service to a bank. So whether back in the day it happened to be my manager with maybe a couple of $1,000s in a thing going down to the bank at some point during the week, if the bank was right around the corner, that's not a big deal. But if you're a larger corporation, you maybe have tens of thousands of dollars in physical cash. A lot of times you contract that out to an armored car service, and they're also insured and everything as well. But that's expensive. That costs money. If you can just have everyone just swipe and all have the digital transactions, that minimizes the literal logistics of moving funds. Rather than having to physically move them, you can digitally move them, which pretty much just costs the price of electricity and then whatever processing fees. So this is something that is coming more and more common, and this is another reason that's in the back of my head somewhere. Maybe I haven't communicated it well, that if we're now having payments become mostly digitized, is that not having real life kind of go in the online direction? And if we have things online becoming real life, because let's face it, dude, we had Sargon of Akkad, aka a ship poster that was running for to be a member of the European Union Parliament. I'm like, that seems like the internet is turning into real life, and if it's going in both directions, like at what point do we actually accept and try to figure this stuff out? Because I mean, the law always lags behind technology. It's like, do we have laws on the books that already cover this? Maybe, probably, much of it. Do we need to do sure.
Yeah, but even if you have any laws, you can bet your ass that the US is gonna break them or not follow them if they don't want to, because laws seem just be for the poor people or the small countries or whatever. It seems like that.
Well,
it does seem like that at times, yeah.
And that goes back to the whole idea of the Bitcoin again, because the idea of the Bitcoin was to have a financial system that acted outside the banking system.
Yes and no, because as I said, people who think that the Bitcoin is maybe the solution, but don't ask where the hell this Bitcoin came from, who made it, and who controls it, and why do people think that something that is a private thing from a private company or somebody that is not in public public domain, that this can be a good thing, that has no that is not controlled by the public or by the government or whatever? Because I can't stand the government, but I can stand can't stand private companies.
Yes, but Bitcoin isn't tied to a private company.
Yeah, but who made this Bitcoin? Where did it come from? Do you know Do you know for sure that it isn't an invention of some secret service or something like that?
Well, if it was the invention of a secret service, then they lost control of it rather quickly, because once the first blockchain technology went out, it's had a real big evolution. And your main issue was that you didn't want someone to be able to trace your transactions, correct?
Yes, yes, I don't
Okay,
want to
then
be
love
traced.
Monero.
Huh?
Monero, you would love that one. It is the first privacy coin that was designed, and it uses what was the word for it again?
Oh, ERC20.
No, a name for a really convoluted and complex way of sending a message or doing business about.
Oh, it's blah 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 blah. It's oh my god, I'm
It's
drawing a
also
blank.
it's an archaic word. That is what I recall about it. But the thing is that when you do a transaction in Monero, your account is the one that is actually doing the payment. You end up paying 3, 4 other people, and their money again is then used for your transaction. Nothing is lost, but the money has been transferred in a way that no one is able to understand who is.
Oh, it's encrypted. Is that what we were
No,
talking
it's
about?
encrypted. It's basically doing a shell game.
Yes, but I can tell you, I'm not a fan of uh, simulated reality in general. And this Bitcoin or other currencies like that just only exist as numbers in the cloud or in the computer or whatever. These are for me not real things. I barely accept real money as a real thing, because even real money, banknotes or paper or whatever, even that is just has is its worth just because we believe in it. There is nothing that is that stood against this worth. If you have $100 note or something like that, it's just $100 because you believe that. It's not $100 because it's worth that, if you know what I mean.
Well, the
Yes,
value
I
is,
understand what you mean.
yeah, it's basically if somebody believes something is worth something, like if all of a sudden you have a cow that you've raised and I want to have a bunch of beef and stuff, maybe it'll take me, I don't know, 1,200 eggs or something like that. Like basically just standard barter. I mean, this is something that we've used for thousands of years. Oh my god, I'm
Yeah,
breaking.
I'm going to give you an example. You have an island, and on this island, 100 people are living on this island, and everybody of them has has a little house and a little bit land, and he puts grows things on his land, and has some animals and something like that. But now you give these people, you give everybody $100 or euros or whatever, and one of these 100 people manages, I don't know how, that he at the end he has all the money, and the others are just in depth with him even. So what does he do? He buys all the land, all the houses, and the others are his slaves. But it's the same island. Nothing has changed. It's just because of the fact you gave them a stupid thing, called it money, or said, is it worth something? And so one of these guys tried to get all of it, and he got all of it with tricks and whatever. And now we have this thing where he owns the whole island, and the others are in fact his slaves, or kind of. And even the people who are born new to this island have to pay for the debts of their fathers and grandfathers and so on. So if I tell you this story, you will say, "Oh yeah, but yeah, that's fantasy. That doesn't make any sense." But it's the story of the Earth. That's exactly happening now.
Well, I agree with you that that is possible to happen, but I don't think that. I still don't think that the blockchain technology is a bad thing, because There is many aspects about the digital world that is based on copies. There is no originals, unique stuff
Well,
on the
what
internet as much.
Well, I mean, that's kind of humanity in and of itself. We've had ideas from our ancestors that we've taken up as sometimes as customs and everything. And the sheer fact that we have the ability to write things down several thousand years ago, we went from verbal transition of knowledge to a written that we could keep over many years. And now we're in the digital transfer of knowledge where literally we have thousands, if not millions of times the knowledge of the Library of Alexandria at our fingertips now, and like that is freaking amazing.
No, no, the opposite is the case, because when we went from the written knowledge to the digital knowledge, now we have 1984, because the digital knowledge is constantly manipulated and made up, and things are left out and changed and so on. And you can change now the knowledge of the world, of the history, like you want to. If I give you an example, if China would overcome the world and become the biggest power, they will start to erase history like we know it. And they can do that because of the digital time we are living in. They can make things up like, oh yeah, China existed, was the whole time, the last 20,000 years, it was number one, and there was never another one empire or something like that. They could make that. And because of the digitalization of things, the next generation is going to believe that, because it's the only information they get.
So couldn't that be combated using something like the blockchain as well? Because then you'd have multi-point references, and if somebody does try
No, because this is all trying to make a treatment for the outcomes of the problem.
okay, so we're not addressing the root.
For the symptoms, it's not trying to solve the problem itself, because I know that blockchain or Bitcoin or whatever is maybe better than this bank thing we have nowadays. This normal bank thing. You can say, yeah, we don't need the banks anymore and something like that. Yeah, I give you that. That's okay, but it doesn't solve the problem itself. It doesn't solve the problem that the whole money system is used as the new form of slavery for most of the people, even if they think they are free, but they aren't. They work, the 99% are working for the 1%. That's a fact.
So basically, what you say is that we should just go back to bartering.
Yeah, but this is also an argument when you say, yeah, but it's not that bad, because it's like in Life of Brian. What did the Rome people ever do for us? And then they say, oh, yeah, build streets. Now we have laws and whatever. Yeah, aqueduct. Yeah, but the thing is, we are still kind of slaves. We really didn't get out of this, and that's the real problem. We have to think how we can change the problem, not the symptom.
And what is the problem? Bit confused here.
Sounds like the digitization. Basically, if you go online and you try to look up something such as like a definition of a word, I don't have the citation, but it does seem that certain definitions may have changed over time. And if you're not aware that they've changed and that's your first exposure, you're going to come to accept that as what is.
Yes, that's one of the biggest problems nowadays. There is this Wikipedia, this so-called what do you call it, encyclopedia?
And it's an online encyclopedia, correct?
No, it isn't.
Well, that's what it was pitched as.
It's a propaganda tool for secret services and so on, and it's a deformation tool for when people are not the same opinion as the people in power. They get their shit there. on Wikipedia. We have here in Germany many people who lost their jobs and lost their lives and so on because of that. It's a big problem here in Germany.
Could you enlighten us to that situation? I'm unfamiliar.
Yeah. We have, for example, we have here a guy. It's called Daniele Ganser, and he wrote about the incidents of 9/11. And when he did that, he lost his job. He is a historian, and he lost his job. And also, they made things up about him, all with this Wikipedia. And now he's writing books about that, but he can't. There are many companies who don't sell his book and so on because of that.
So he was smeared from fake news on Wikipedia.
Yes. And Wikipedia is just one example. It's not just Wikipedia. It's everything big online. Wikipedia is just one example. It's the most famous one. But Wikipedia is not on its own. There are many things, and the thing is, what we have nowadays is a kind of illusion of a matrix. It's an illusion of a world that is working, but it isn't.
How do we fix it? Because you said we've been treating symptoms. How do we actually fix the underlying problems?
It's not so easy to fix them from 1 second to another, and also it's not so easy to fix them as if you are on your own. You can't fix shit because it's so big. Because even if you try to use the system, the law system or whatever, if somebody uses Wikipedia against you, and you go and go to the judge and say, here, this is not true, the judge tells you, yeah, but it's Wikipedia, it's not in Germany, or it's not in this country, we can't prosecute that.
And again, I'm not sure about Germany. Sorry to cut you off, Cub, but I'm like, if any judge over here in the States claimed, but it's Wikipedia, bruh, I don't think they would necessarily remain a judge for that long. Because could you use that as a node reference point? Yeah, but then there's supposed to be links for citation. If there's not citation, you don't have qualified sources, then I'm like, what the heck is it? Because I mean, that goes back to rule 1 of the internet. Don't believe everything you see on the internet.
Yeah, it's funny because the reason why these things are happening in this world, also in Germany, are the US. And the US is now the freest country on this planet, kind of. Because it's the only country where there is a kind of free speech, but it's also the country that is responsible for every abuse of laws and speech, free speech, and so on in other countries, like here in Germany. We are an occupied country. We are occupied from the US, and we don't have our own government. It's put in from the US. This Merkel puppet, you have seen her in the television, I think. She's just one example, but it's in many countries that way.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure about that. I mean, I'm happy to take a look at any evidence. I mean, does the United States have major influence within the rest of the world? Abso-freaking-lutely.
Yes,
No, nobody
yes.
can deny that at all.
Yes, you have your troops here. Your troops are still here.
What was that? Because you kind of asked us. I mean, I realize that's a different topic at all. I thought that was NATO based. No, but you're not wrong about that. You're not wrong. We do have troops, and we also have a lot of big boom things over there.
And if you have troops in a foreign country, you are the occupier of this country, because no country would ever allow you troops in.
Isn't that because of just the NATO alliance, though?
Yeah, so-called NATO.
Okay, all right. No, I'm just curious.
Yeah, but the NATO is also just it's under the influence of the US. It's just another word for US. What do you call it?
No, I hear what you're saying, and
murderer troops or whatever. It's just
President Trump has talked about potentially scrapping NATO, and there are many folks that are for that, and many folks that are against that as well. And again, everyone has their own reasons for that. But to just kind of like circle it back around and just kind of wrap up here, because we've been going for probably pushing, I don't know, an hour and a half now. And I realize Irate Prostate, that a lot of folks kind of pieced out to go over to his stream because the cream stream or ice cream is very tasty, I hear. But just some final thoughts on the internet and real life. Are we intersecting? Which way are we trending? Hakaran, would you mind just kind of giving us your final thoughts on this? And then we'll go Cub and then myself.
Well, I believe that the way things are going to progress further on is that we will likely always have the avatar and the real name, simply because of the way information flows is happening. I also believe that the blockchain will be further evolved and become the core of what will be a more node-like structure on the internet, simply because it's a way to safeguard information and keep things unique. So when you reference to something, you can reference to that specific thing and not a web page that can be altered or changed from day to the next.
Cool. No, thanks. Cub?
Yeah, I think internet is becoming, for many people, real life like. It would never be the real life, but it becomes a more and more big part in their life. And if this trend goes on, there will come a time where people are going to see that this is the wrong way. And this whole internet thing maybe will have an implosion or a restart or whatever. I don't think that it can go on forever like that.
Well, that's I've actually had that kind of go through my head at some times. I'm just going back to the old 8-bit NES system where your game wasn't working, so you just kind of you pull it out, you're blowing it a few times, you hit the reset button, you hope it works, and a lot of times it would. But as far as my final thoughts go on this topic, I do think we're starting to see a merge, and like any dimensional merge, it seems to be pretty messy right now. And I think since we're in uncharted territory at the moment, we're not really sure the rules, because how do real life rules apply to the internet, whether it's actually on the books or social, culturally, as well as vice versa. So we're trying to figure this out as well. That's one of the reasons why I did the whole skepticsguild.com. Aside from just leaning into the cringe to continue on, I did want to just have an old school forum just so we could kind of just have discussions about these things and kind of have arguments from left, right, center, up, down, negative, positive, whatever it might be, to kind of just cut through and just kind of see if maybe we can come up with just some general basic heuristics, if you would, of just, maybe if somebody's saying not so nice things on the internet, rather than that being their exact opinion, maybe they could be trolling. And if you take that mindset, maybe things would make more sense, because I factor in about 20% of the internet as trolls. When I apply that to my methodology and just look at stuff on the internet, I'm like, oh, things make more sense. But hey, thank you for everybody that's been watching and anybody that will tune in the future. I'm going to toss these fine gentlemen's links to their channels in the chat below after the stream. And hey, peace out and be safe, everybody. I'm going to hit the